Welcome to the Warrior Razor podcast. We're your hosts, Angela
and Carrie.
We all need help and support to stay future focused and challenged to courageously pursue the life God has called us to live. What we do matters.
Here on the Warrior Razor podcast, we seek Jesus first and use the skills, talents, and passions he has given us second. Hello, Warrior Razors. Carrie Smith here, and I get to introduce today's podcast guest. So today on the show, we have my friend Valarie Grimes. Valarie is the planter as well as lead pastor of Radiant Church in Savannah, Georgia. And Valarie and I, we connected because of our common church planting history, if you will. But really, I stayed friends with her because Valarie is that type of person you just want to be around. Her spirit is so positive. She has Jesus in her heart. And when you leave her, you leave better. So I can't wait for you to just be in her presence as you listen to this interview. You are in for a treat today. Let's go ahead and get to it. Here is our interview with Valarie Grimes.
Well, welcome to the Warrior Razor podcast. My name is Angela Johnson, and I have my co-host Carrie Smith with us today. And we have a very special guest, Valarie Grimes, with us. And we've already kind of done a little quick bio and introduction on Valarie, but we are excited to have you on the show today. And we're in our season of small beginnings. And I don't know you as well as Carrie does. So this is fun for me because I get to meet a new friend. But in the conversation, I'm going to let Carrie kind of guide us. But before we begin, will you just kind of give us a fun fact about you, something that just helps us get to know you a little bit better and lets our viewers and our listeners just know just who Valarie is, kind of 30,000 foot view.
Yes. Well, I am so glad to be here with you guys today. Thank you for the invite. And Carrie, oh, love you, girl.
Love you too. Love you too.
I think, and so good to meet you, Angela. Fast friends. That's who I am. I'm a fast friend. I will say something interesting about me. And if anyone follows me at all on any social media, they know I have two of the most amazing grandkids alive. They are phenomenal. And as we were coming in, just to be transparent, I was having to pull their fort off of my couch behind me because they are free. Yes, they are free to just be all over this house because they are creative. And I mean, they get in. I love the painting and the drawing and they write stories now. And so it's just so amazing. But I think I've been married to my husband, Ramon Grimes, for 36 years. We had two beautiful children from that union. My son, David, who has gone on to glory, is still making marks in my heart today. And so much of my life is lived to honor his memory. My daughter, Courtney, who is the mother of my two amazing grandkids. And I am a church planter, my God. And a registered nurse. I've been a registered nurse for 30 years. And, that's a love of mine as well. And I think it trained me, gave me the ability to be a church planter. Being a nurse, you have to think on your feet really fast, come up with solutions and plans, and you need to be on your tiptoes all the time. So it prepared me for church planting. And I have been a lover of God since I can remember. And so all of those things have come full circle and they mesh together. And that's who I am.
Okay, I have a question. This has prompted me because I am also a nurse by training. And so I put the hashtag nurse to Bible teacher because it doesn't track with people to understand like, wait, you're in medicine and now you're in full-time ministry like that. Like explain that just do you get that question a lot? And if so,
I do.
What's your answer? I need an answer.
I do. Well, I will tell you, I guess a short answer to really a long process. For me, nursing was the way I expressed the ministry that was in me.
Yes.
Because as a female, I didn't see a lot of female leaders in church, preaching or leading or guiding a church. And so I knew that ministry was in me. It was my heart. And healing, was a part of who I am. It was who God made me to be. And so for me, nursing was that ministry. True, I had to, go to school and get my degree and all of that. But the essence of bedside nursing was what just motivated me, being able to go in and being that kind face that a person sees, but also having the technical knowledge to help them physically feel better was just amazing. And there were patients who noticed. They were like, there's something different about you and the other nurses. What is it? And I had an opportunity to kind of share Jesus with them. I couldn't go into a lot of details, but I would let them know, hey, my faith life really drives me. I love Jesus and it shapes the person that I am. And if they opened the door and said, talk more, then I could. So it was my ministry. It really was my ministry. It was a normal transition into full-time ministry because it's all healing. If you approach nursing only from the technical side, you'll be a miserable nurse.
And not a very good one.
And not a very good one. Absolutely. Because I worked with quite a few of them. But when you look at it as holistic, that the person is body, mind, and spirit, then it fuels who you are. And so I had so many amazing opportunities to, combine all of that ministry within the same area. And so for me, it's just an extension of healing.
Yeah, ooh, that's good.
I love that. Yeah. I have a similar testimony with teaching. Teaching was my ministry for the ministry I felt inside me, which we're all ministers, everything we do, every profession. But that's how I expressed it. Even before God called me into full-time ministry within a church and within this context. So love that. Love that. Well, yes, Val, love you as well. I'm so glad that you are on the podcast and that you've said yes to us. We have been friends I was trying to think of how long. I'm thinking it's at least 4 years. I think I met you just before, like in 2019 is when I was trying to think back towards. And we met because of mutual church planting backgrounds. And
Absolutely.
We met in a cohort of women who support each other through how they're planting their churches and whatever role that is, lead pastor, kids ministry, a wife of a lead pastor, all the things. And so that's a little bit about how we met and became really wonderful friends. And with church planting, a lot of people maybe don't know what that is, but you're basically starting a business. Business isn't the right word, but you are in effect the leader of people, of finances, of all kinds of things that relate to business. And so I wouldn't want to call church a business, but there are aspects that come together. And so with what Angela and I do together, with helping entrepreneurs start businesses, as well as ministries and nonprofits and things, it really relates. And I think a lot of what you're going to talk about today and tell us some advice and part of your testimony and your journey is going to resonate so well with our listeners. So let's start here. When you think of your journey with church planting, and with God's kind of story, how he unfolded Radiant Church, where in those, and maybe start from earlier on and move forward. It's okay if you kind of go back and forth, but where does this idea and where we want to focus today on pivoting? Okay. So you're starting a business, you have all these ideas, or you're starting this ministry, you know what you want it to look like. You might even feel like God has given you a clear vision. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait, nope, that's not it. What's going on? So tell us some times where you have felt that strong sense of needing to pivot and what that kind of looked like and how you got through that.
Yes. Well, you are absolutely right, Carrie, that church planting it's starting a business. It really
Right.
is. And I think that what a lot of people neglect to understand is that church has a business side.
It sure
And if
does.
we only look at the spiritual side of things, you
Yeah.
may be great at taking care of people spiritually and making sure that they're nourished in that area. But if you can't keep the lights on in the building, or you can't buy the chairs for the children's church, then it doesn't make a difference, because then you've lost all that you've been fighting for. So it is definitely like starting a business. So just to, agree with you there.
Yeah.
For us, we started our process in 2019. And it came after a tragedy. As I said, in 2017, we lost our oldest son to violence. And he was a music minister at his church and loved people and loved to take care of people, and was helping a young lady who was in a bad situation. And the couple turned on him and he was killed. And sometimes I can tell that story without turning into a bag of tears, and sometimes all I can do is weep. And but what it did for me is I had to really lean in and ask God, Lord, how does this happen to someone who loves you and is doing their best to live for you? And he reminded me that this is a broken world that we live in, and though he's putting my heart back together, there are others whose hearts are wounded and broken, and they're not bringing those hearts to him. And so I had some decisions to make. And in the process of that, he reminded me that my son knew him, but there are other 27-year-olds who don't. And so now, Valarie, what are you going to do with the gift that I've given you? And I had to, really lean into healing from the loss of my son and preparing myself for the next steps. And so in 2019, after having, made that decision, yes, Lord, I'm going to move forward and we're going to start this church. I went and I met with Stadia, which is a church planning organization, went through their assessment process, which it was like being dropped on Survivor Island. Oh my God.
It is.
It was like, go for what you know.
I mean,
and
just hearing this is like, this is not a task for a weak person. Like and you just came through like a horrific tragedy within your family. And it's like, okay, and now do this thing also.
And
here we go. Like, now
do this thing. Well, I'm happy to report that they recognize that process was a little bit arduous, and they have revamped it. And I am now working with that new process to help other planners move through it. So, but I will say that even with that process, what they do is they help you project manage, which is what? Starting a business, guys. And so they helped with that portion. And so I'm grateful for that. My project manager was Wesley, and Wesley was so transparent with me. He says, Valarie, you have a heart for the people. I don't doubt that you will affect anyone and everyone you meet, but, and this was the part, this was where pivot came in, but he says, you have got to concentrate on this administrative side. And so for me, I had to make a pivot there and start to learn the entrepreneur side of church. And it was a process that it broke my heart, because I just wanted to be with the people. I wanted to pray with them, love on them, and see their lives changed. But we had to get things together. So anyway, it was really an interesting time there.
I'm going to stop you for just a second. Just a second. Don't fast forward yet. Did you, when you were in that moment, did you want to fight it? Did you want to be like, no, I don't need that? Or were you able to really accept it right away? Or how did you kind of come to the fact that you're like, nah, he's right? Was that easy, hard?
We were together for 8 months, and there were moments that I came on to our meetings in tears. Even right now, I think about it and it chokes me up, because I felt like a failure. You know, everybody that was in our cohort, they were rocking and rolling. They were, you know, getting the financing they needed. They were meeting people and all of that. And here I was almost, I felt like at 6 months in, I felt like I was on day one. And so I mean, moments that I literally cried because I was like, maybe I'm just not cut out for this, you know? And Wes would be like, Valarie, yes, you are. You just think differently and you know, you approach things differently, but you are cut out for this. And so I also have been, I will tell you, in the last year, formally diagnosed with ADHD.
Oh,
Formally, I say,
okay.
I knew all along, but
You're like, I self-diagnosed a long time ago.
it was what made me, you know, me. But it's been a formal diagnosis mainly because I wanted to take control of those areas that were out of control, that executive functioning, that neurotypical people have, you know, neurotypical people, they can put things in order and go 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm ADHD. I say 10, 12, 21, 2, 0, 9, 8, 7. You know, that's just how my brain works. And so for those people who are listening who have ADHD and have problems with executive functioning, don't feel like a failure. Don't count yourself out. Find out what works for you. And for me, Wesley was so amazing. He said, lean into what you do best. And as you lean into that, you're going to find people who do the other part better. And then you make them a part of your team, make them a part of what's making this move forward. And so that's what I had to do. So the pivot was,
I think that's good though.
I can do it all.
I want to interrupt you there for a minute. I think that's good for people to hear, like, you aren't called to do everything. We're not supposed to do all the things. And sometimes we are. We're the coach, we're the player, we're the water girl, we're all the things. Oftentimes I say I work for a team of me, myself, and I. But that's how it is when you're first starting a thing. But it's exhausting because oftentimes we're not functioning in our true giftings or our true anointings. But it's seasonal, and I think that the Lord was gracious to reveal that to you. Like, okay, lean in with even through the help of this Wesley gentleman, lean into the gifts and the talents, and then the Lord will bring the people alongside of you. And so I think that that's important for anyone who's listening. Like, you might be doing all the things, me, myself, and I in it right now, but eventually, if you keep on in the calling that He's given you and brought you to, He'll bring people alongside you. You just gotta pray for it and be faithful in it. So I hear that, and I think that that's encouraging.
For sure.
Absolutely. I do know, though, that for about the first 8 months of this, it was myself, my husband, and one other person.
That's good to know.
It was a long time of me, myself, and eyeing it, because my husband would be very quick to say he's neurotypical and I am neurodivergent. And there were moments when, you know, that ADHD kicked in and he was like, look, I'll be back when you find Valarie, because because this is not her right now. So yeah, it is. And you have to find your strengths, you know, and if you are, you know, suspecting that there's something different about yourself, find out, you know, go get that diagnosis. For me, knowing for sure has freed me to, I have an executive functioning coach. I have started counseling with someone who specializes in ADHD. I have gone on to get accommodations. Oh my God. I'm back in school now, seeking my master's in Christian formation. So I've gone back and I am getting accommodations because I have to understand what my strengths are, what my weaknesses are. And those weaknesses, you staff to those weaknesses, you get accommodations for those weaknesses, you pray desperately over those weaknesses. And so, that was kind of what that piece in part was. So, but I will say that even when we moved forward in it, like I said, fast forward, we start our 2020 January, we start our first interest meetings. And, it was like, yes, we're going to do this. It's amazing. And then in February, we had another interest meeting. Yep. This is it. We got some people returning. We got some new people. We're excited. March, we were going to go to 2 interest meetings.
We all know what happened in March.
Yeah. So we had the first interest meeting and, it was good. We were getting some momentum. And then the second one was supposed to be on, I think it was the 15th, somewhere between the 15th and the 19th of March. And the world shut down.
Yep.
And here I am, this crazy lady who has finally said yes to God in her 50s.
Yeah.
You're never too old. In her 50s, I said yes. Yeah. And the world shuts down. And I said, okay, I'm sorry, everybody. COVID happened because I waited too long to say yes. And then, you can write me all the letters you want. But anyway, so that's another pivot. There's another pivot. Do we stop this thing that's taking so long to get started? Do we keep going? How do we keep going? And so we ended up having our interest meetings via Zoom and continued the momentum. And that was 2020. We even started working with our community leaders because we saw so many people in our community where they were doing good things for people, but nobody knew what the others were doing. And so little old Radiant with about, at that time, maybe 12 people, started a meeting on Zoom with our community leaders, nonprofit leaders, business leaders, and we called it Community Talk, Ripples Make Waves. And we had like 40, 50 people come into these meetings, and everybody would kind of tell the things that they were doing. And we had questions, that they were answering in breakout rooms. And I was like, oh my God.
Wow.
So amazing. People got connected. Nonprofits start working with the city. We had for-profit businesses offering services for free. And it was amazing. And that lasted probably about 8 months. We were doing that. And the world started to open up again. And so it kind of dissipated. But the connections that were made as a result of that are still being seen today. So I am just, amazed at what God does. And that's the pivot, finding out what works at that time. And out of that, out of those meetings, we have probably about 6 people that are now a part of Radiant's team because of us taking that time to pivot. Fast forward, I was still non-denominational on my own. And Wesley was long in my history, but words that he spoke were resonating. He says, you need a tribe, you need a tribe, you need a tribe. And because we were non-denominational, we were not sent by anyone. We were doing this all on our own. And so that was in 2021. We were doing virtual church. So we were doing the whole thing, the Facebook, the YouTube, all of that with everyone else that was kind of pivoting at that time. And those words just kept resonating in my head. You need a tribe. And so I had a friend who also planted, and she planted in Detroit at about the same time. But I saw that she was prospering. She had the funding she needed. She was getting resources. And I was just like, man, I need to figure out what she's doing. And I talked to her and she says, I'm a part of the Evangelical Covenant Church and they are planting us. And by doing so, they're helping with resources. And so that was another thing I had to stop and make a decision. Because, in your mind, you think, I see the church looking this way, and I don't want a denomination to come in and, mess up what God told me. It's like, I don't want it. And so I had to pray about it. I had them and one other organization in mind. And so I kind of interviewed them. They interviewed me, and I felt very comfortable. They affirm women fully in ministry. They ordain women fully in ministry, and they have resources to help launch and to push them into those ministries. And so I am now part of the Evangelical Covenant Church. We're planting under their umbrella. It called for a whole reset.
Did it?
Oh, I didn't realize that about. I remember when
Yes.
all of this was going down, but I didn't realize that part. Okay. Talk about that.
Yeah. Yes, because we had to, if we wanted to come in as a church plant, they were willing to bring us on as partners. But partnership just means you come in as an established church and you're just an affiliate. But to be a church plant, I had to go back through
Oh no.
that whole assessment thing over again. And so we had to pray about that because
Been
I told
there,
my husband,
done that.
Yeah. Like,
been
really
there.
again, God?
And we had to go through that again. My poor husband, I paraded him like a little show pony through that process, and he was willing to do it. And so it called for a reset. We had to kind of halt where we were, which means now we had to let our people know we are still radiant, we are still moving forward, but our meetings just look a little different. And so when you're pivoting, sometimes you have to kind of dismantle what you have, and you have to reimagine what it could look like.
That's good.
And I am so grateful for the decision that we've made, because now we have the support of a full denomination. And I will tell you, they welcomed us with open arms. I went from being the new girl to, people calling and saying, hey, we see that you're doing church this way. We're really interested in it. Tell us what you do and how you did it. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I'm the new kid on the block. But there's one thing, Angela and Carrie, that God gave me. And I sometimes get upset about this ADH brain, but what it does is it kind of makes me not afraid.
Right.
That's
So,
great. That's a superpower within it. Yeah.
So I go in these rooms with these seasoned pastors who've been part of the ECC for 45 years.
You're like, here I am, new girl on the block.
And I just come in and I said, this is the vision that God gave me, that we have, it's sort of like dinner church. We gather around the table. And so we have a meal with every service. We come in, we do worship, and then we break, go get our food, bring it in. And then we have the word around the table. People are disarmed. They are willing to talk. I do dialogical preaching. My preaching is not just me, spewing facts at you or trying to get you to, be filled with the Spirit. It's preaching that makes you think. And I ask questions. I get the input from the people there. So we just have a good old time, at church, and God is blessing that. And people were like, well, wait a minute, how do you do that? And so I've had an opportunity to talk to people who are coming out of COVID and they're trying to do things differently. And because of my little neurodivergent self, I was already doing it different, And so they're learning from me, and I'm thinking,
love it.
Okay, Lord, I see you. I see how you're doing this. And so that's, the pivot is just remembering that you don't always have the answers. Because I love the Lord, He does. And He knew that COVID was coming. He knew that I would need to be affiliated with a denomination. He knew those things, but He also knew that hardhead Valarie would have to bump her head to get to Him,
That's good.
So it's just been a great journey. What we're doing now, just to kind of let you know, and it's a pivot, is that we've recognized that what makes Radiant work is the intimacy. So we won't grow over 150. And so we're now preparing to get a group of people to take from the group we have now, and we're going to plant them in another area of Savannah. And then we're going to plant another area of Savannah. We're going to the four corners of Savannah. And then we got some surrounding cities and counties, and we don't want to even any of them to grow over 150. And as that happens, we have a unified leadership team, which means that even once those locations start, we'll get together weekly. We'll plan our sermons together. We'll plan how how polity is handled. There'll be a main budget that helps to fund all of the churches because they're going to be in different places, and it's the whole thing is a pivot.
Yeah, it really is.
The whole thing.
So
My
cool.
mind is spinning. Through hearing you talk, I've had so many questions, and I'm like, I have a brain that works very much in that same capacity, and I feel like I have spaghetti brain. Okay, we talk about this and this and this, and like, oh wait, what were we saying a minute ago?
Yeah.
But to back it up to what your journey, because you've covered a lot in just a very truncated amount of time. Oh, and by the way, you lost a son. Oh, and by the way, COVID, and the world learned the word pivot. I mean, I think we heard that word a million times every other day. And it's like, okay, that's part of the everyday vernacular now. But in the beginning, because that's what we're kind of focused on, the small beginnings in this series. You were a nurse, and you were a seasoned veteran nurse. And here you are. Like, for most people, they'll just ride that wave to the sunset to retirement. Yeah. And you're like, oh no, but God put this dream and this planted this seed in my heart. That alone is huge. So will you take us back to the first, like, those thoughts when God just started to whisper these words to you about how to even, church planting is not for the weak or the weary. It's huge. So will you talk about when God revealed this dream and this calling to you?
Yeah.
Well, like I said, shortly after my son died, that was that time of just reconnecting with, okay, God, this is crazy. What next? How do I even pull out of this? And I ended up coming out of the hospital for about a year and a half because that environment just wasn't for me, because that was the last place I saw my child. And so I just had to come out for a while, and I worked on staff at a church plant. And in the process of that, just really pouring myself into that setting, the pastor, that church was about a year and a half old. And so they had about 75 people, and the pastor was trying to do everything. And God told me, literally, go in and help. And so I was a super volunteer, wasn't paid a penny during this time, just a super volunteer. Ended up being what they call the church administrator or coordinator. So kind of the person people could come to. So he was now freed up to do ministry. And, that's what I said. You can't do everything. And so it was funny that that I did that side of things, but it freed up so much. And we saw so much growth in that time period. And this is all prior to 2019. So that church grew from about 75 to 100 people to about 400 people in a year and a half, just because, not me, but because of having that role filled. It could have been anybody filling the role, but having that role filled, it opened the door for so much more. And so it let me see what church planting was prior to starting the journey with Stadia.
That's training ground, right? And it's like sometimes we look on training begrudgingly. I mean, that's how Carrie and I met. We were apprentices for a woman who was kind of established in her career. And it's like, I'm a 40-year-old intern, but it's like, we can't look begrudgingly on those moments where it's like the world might be like, oh, good for you. You're a super volunteer. Like, how rewarding. But it was setting you up for a skill set that you would need in the space that you're in today. So I think that's so valuable. I mean, with hindsight, right? But in the middle of it, you're like, meh.
Like, sometimes I'm gonna tell you, there were days I went in and because I would go on and set up the sanctuary for service, and I go in, sometimes it's time to make the donuts. It's time to make the donuts. And the funny thing is, sometimes, and you feel like I'm making the donuts, and then he gets to pass them out to everybody, and like, wow, the donuts are delicious. But It is such a proving ground. You are right. And so if there's someone who's interested in a certain field, starting a business, find someone who's doing something similar, volunteer, find out what they're doing and how they're doing it, and, and do it with an open heart. So like I said, there were days that I went in, I was fired up and I was ready to go. And then there were days I was like, oh my goodness, I feel like I'm being taken for granted. But it did two things for me. It taught me what it looked like to be a leader of a church plant. And it also proved my character, because God's like, girl, you need to sit down, because you're a little full of yourself.
Right, some humble.
And so you have to walk through those times. He humbled me during that time period and healed me during that time period. So
yeah, Carrie and I, that seems to be a theme on repeat with the groups that we've been working with. It's this space of humility. And that God has to work with the humble heart. He can't work with anybody else that thinks more highly of themselves than they ought. So that's good.
Yeah.
That's the truth. That's the truth. And there were humbling moments. I tell pastors now, because, God's brought me full circle. I'm actually coaching church planters now through Asbury Theological Seminary. And, and I get to tell them, if you're not willing to clean the bathroom on a consistent basis, you're not ready to lead people.
Yeah.
Yep. That's just the truth of the matter. If you feel above going in and cleaning the men's bathroom, not just the bathroom, but the men's bathroom, if you're above that, then you are too high for God,
Yep.
So
that's a great place to check your heart and check your spirit. Are you willing to do the things that nobody else wants to, and to give God the glory for it? Before, if you can do that, with a spirit of humility and thanksgiving and gratitude, then you might just be ready to move into some of the things God's going to ask you to do otherwise. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let's go back real quick to, excuse me. You mentioned at 50, and you kind of paused for a second.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things, when I interviewed you for a podcast that I ran, shameless plug, go check it out. There's like 2 years worth of episodes, people. It's called Gathered Courage. But I laid it down. God asked me to lay it down, and I think
you pivoted.
I pivoted. But when I interviewed you, one of the things we focused on was this idea of age. And I remember very specifically, and I tell people it all the time. My friend Val said,
she quotes you. I will confirm.
I do. And I give you credit. I say, my friend Val says there's no retirement in the Bible. And I just love that, because I see so many, in all kinds of spheres, in the church world, in the secular world, all kinds of people, as they get older, been there, done that, done my time, let younger people take care of that. And there's almost this like callousness to their heart, or this interesting mindset that their work is done.
Yeah. Or they've earned the right to just fade off into the sunset in comfort.
Yeah. Now, as I get older, I understand. I turned 40, Val, and like a flip switched.
You're a baby.
My thyroid stopped working. My thyroid stopped working. Just some stuff like that. Aches and pains, right? I tease, but I do understand, as you get older, things get a little harder. Life is challenging in different ways. I respect that. But talk about your mindset and how you've been able to kind of overcome that idea of, I've done my time, and let's do, I'm too old for that. Or, surely I can't do this at this age. This is for the young kids. God's not going to use me, kind of thing. Go ahead. Sorry, I'll stop.
I think I shared this story with you, and you're right. I say that all the time. There is no retirement. There's nowhere that people retired in the Bible. They may have switched what they were doing. Yep. They may, but they don't retire. They are there for life. And for me, I think I told you this story, Carrie, but at the Stadia CPAC
Yes, that's right.
assessment
That's right.
center.
Uh-huh.
This young man came up to me. At the beginning, we had to introduce ourselves and all that kind of stuff. And at that time, my husband and I were about to go into our 33rd anniversary. And so I was like, oh, we've been married almost 33 years. Well, this little whippersnapper walks up to me after the first assignment that we had to do that night. And he says, wow. He says, I just want to know, why are you doing this? He says, you have been married almost as long as I've been alive.
Rude.
Rude.
Back up.
One of those little the side eye and all that. And so,
yes.
I had a decision to make as to how I would address this young man.
You sure did.
And what the Lord gave me, and it was clear as day. And I says, I feel a little bit like Caleb. Caleb, God had given him the vision of the promised land. He knew what it looked like. And he says, we can do this. And everybody decided, no, we can't do this right now, But when Caleb came into the place that God had given him, he stood up and he says, I was 40. He says, and now I am I think he was 45 when he got it, and he was 80 by the time he got there. He looks at the mountain and he says, I am still well able to take this mountain. Yeah. Not because he wanted to, but because God promised it to him. Yes. God promised me a long time ago that I would be leading a group of people, pastoring them and, helping to nurture their spiritual growth. He promised me that a long time ago. And because I kept moving in the different direction, and because people were saying, no, not yet, it didn't mean it wasn't time for him. And so when I got to that moment, and I told that young man, I says, I'm still well able to take that mountain. Yes. Don't give me the plain. I don't want an easy area. I want the mountain that God promised me. And so you are never too old. If it is God inspired, you are not too old to do whatever it is that he has put in your heart to do. And so I'm still well able to take that mountain. I am 55 years old, and I feel, people are like, oh, you're a senior citizen. I says, yes, ma'am, I am. Give me my discount and come to my church.
We have dinner.
Yes, I love that. So good.
You're never too old to do what God has said. Now, what I tell you, the pivot for me in this arena is to recognize that I have not been extremely good to my body. I had to stop and say, Valarie, if this body is to do what God has asked, what do you need to do?
This is good.
And so I'm working with Dr. Yvonne Moore. She's an OBGYN who has a group called Healthier You, and she talks about aging well. And so I have cut my carbs really low. I exercise, and I have it's been 2 years that I've been working with her. I have lost over 50 pounds. Wow. I have started doing strength training because the older you get, you lose muscle mass. And so I've started taking care of myself differently, respecting the fact that I have a mountain I have to take.
This is good because we're given this one life. And if he's called us to something, we have to not only steward the calling, but we have to steward the vehicle to achieve the calling. I think that this is something that we neglect a lot, especially as women, especially as mothers. We are naturally inclined for caregiving roles. So we will put ourselves on the back burner of a lot of things. And then we start to, now I have to address it because it's like a siren in my face where I can't move past this until I start to address it. So maybe before we do that, we'll get to that place, we need to start stewarding our bodies and ourselves really well. Carrie and I, in the ministry that we have with the cohorts, with the work, you talked about having a tribe around you. That's the organization that Carrie and I manage together. We have the Warrior Women Tribe. And in the tribe, we specifically talk about how are you stewarding your body? How are you stewarding your health and your wellness. Because taking it full circle back to your original role as a nurse, Valarie, it's like you've got those nurses that are really technical and know the content, but the spiritual aspect of it as well. And it's like, no, the best are the ones that approach it from a holistic point of view. And same goes with the mission of our lives, the ministry of our lives. And so we have to approach it from a holistic point of view as well. So I think that alone is just if that's a nugget, you've given us so many nuggets today, but that is a major nugget that the woman on the other end of this call, listening, watching, whatever, please, if you are feeling a nudge in your spirit right now, where you're not taking care of yourself like the Lord has asked of you, you're not going to get to the mountain. You're not, because you're not taking care of what he's asked of you first. So I think that's a take home point alone. So thank you for that.
Yes, I know. I feel like we could do a whole podcast on that. That's been a journey I've been on too, Val. Just recently, well, since coming into full-time ministry, I feel like part of me feels icky to say this, but being in ministry is what really has awoken me to this idea of if I love it. I love doing this and I want to do it for a really long time. Ministry, even above my family, which again feels icky for me to say, but even above having my children, I want to live for them for a long time. I do. But something about ministry has got me in this place where I'm like, I want to do this forever. And for as long as he calls me to it, I want to do it. And so I understand that longing and that humility that it takes to be like, yeah, I'm not where I could be. I'm not taking care of this body. And I've heard message after message, but I'm with you on that something about ministry. And that's what really the nudge for me as well. And the place where I'm still way on that journey, preaching to myself right here. But it's interesting to think about the thing God calls us to and the connection to our body. We want to ignore it so deeply, and we can't ignore it.
Cannot at all. And I think, for me, it's funny because I was on that call for probably a year being extremely rebellious, thinking, sure, that's how it works. That's for you guys. You're the ones. I can do it my way. And didn't lose a pound, felt sluggish, come on the call thinking, oh my God, they're going to ask me, but it wasn't until I really surrendered and said, okay, like you said, the ministry that you've given me, Lord, I've got to be physically whole for it. And when I really started to follow the plan that she gave, and it's a lifestyle, it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. And now that I've brought that in, it fuels me. I stay energized. I can deal with my 2 grandbabies and go preach a sermon. Go build forts, and then I can go and jump on a plane and fly to Wilmore, Kentucky, and deal with students. So but it's because I had to surrender to that, and I had to give up that little rebellious attitude of it'll be all right. God called me to it. He calls you to be. To use your brain to take care of this body and to take care of your spirit, take care of all those things. And so, I can't say I'm going to pray over the huge hunk of chocolate cake. Lord, don't let it put any weight on me. And,
don't nourish me to my body.
There you go. No calories after I pray. No calories.
That's right.
The Lord says, oh, please.
We pray it away.
I love it.
Well, I think I'm with Carrie. Like, I want to keep this conversation going, but in the thought of time, is there anything else that you want to leave the listeners with, the viewers with, about the call to the small beginning, the steadfastness in the journey, the pivoting, and just the open awareness of our emotion and having those conversations with God along the way? Is there anything that you want to leave, just a last Valarie nugget for us?
I think for me, I value women in ministry. I think you've probably heard it in my voice. I believe that when a woman sells out to God, that the world changes. The world around her changes. And so I've said this many times, for young women out there who feel the call of God on their lives, whether that's to be in full-time ministry or whether that's to start a business, whatever he's calling you to, don't push it off. Lean into it. Find someone who will believe in your dream too, and work with you. Don't settle. Settling is sickening. It literally is. It makes the heart sick. The Bible says that a dream deferred makes the heart sick. And so we need to lean into that. Take the chance, step out on faith and stop being afraid. You are stronger than you know. You are more resilient than you will ever understand. And there are people who will believe in you. And if you're working with people who don't, find new people.
That's right.
That's right. Find new people. Find new people. I have people that I've had to kind of walk away because they thought, this is ridiculous. You're doing this because, your heart was broken. No, ma'am, I'm doing this because God called me to it so many years ago. The fact that this tragedy happened opened my eyes to the fact that life is short. It opened my eyes to the fact that life is short and I don't have a lot of time to play with God. I've got to get about his business. And so that person is like, I pray for them and I love them still, will do anything for them, but they're not allowed to speak into my dream. They're just not.
So it's like a Nehemiah prayer. Like Nehemiah kept the dream close to his heart. He didn't tell everybody. He told a couple people, because not everybody's they shouldn't, like you're saying, they should not be given a place at your table to speak into the dream that God has given you. So that's good. That's good.
Oh, so
absolutely
good.
But women, trust yourselves. Trust yourselves. Think about this. The God of the universe created you to bring life into the world. He equipped your body to bring life into the world. And guess what? That life is not just another physical human being. Amen. Sometimes that life is a dream. Sometimes that life is a ministry, a business. Sometimes it's teaching, kindergartners. Sometimes it's being a nurse on a wound care unit. But those are dreams that God allows to be birthed through you. So trust yourself. Know that he knows who you are. He knows who he created you to be. And Ephesians says it so well. Ephesians 2:10, for we are his masterpiece, created in Christ Jesus for good works that he has already predestined for us to walk in. You didn't just come up with it. It was predestined. He already put it in.
That's good.
For you. He already laid it out for you. He just says, walk in it. Walk in it.
Yeah, sometimes we think, this is our original idea. No, he's given it to us. Oh, this is so good. Thank you, Valarie.
Thank you.
I'm just like encouraged.
Same. I'm like tearing up over here. Like, gosh, I needed that. Thank you.
I don't know. For anybody that's listening, walk in the calling, walk in it, and he will not let us stumble, because if he's called us to it, he'll equip us through it. Those are little Christian quips that we say all the time, but there's truth in them. So good. So good. Thank you, Valarie, for your time. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and to meet you. And we look forward to seeing the next thing that Radiant and you are doing. And hey, when you pivot, we know that it's going to be in a really amazing direction.
It is. I feel like every pivot, as painful as it has been, every pivot has just been for God's glory, his good, your good, his glory. I love it. Thanks for being on the show.
Yes. And to all of our fellow warrior raisers, aim your arrows well.
Yay. Thank you, Val.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you enjoyed our conversation, please go ahead and like and share it. You can also find us on www.warriorrazor.com.